Andre, what encouraged you as you preach the sermon?
Just how God is so gracious to us in His provision, and how great of salvation He has given us, even not only eternally, but even this life itself. He's saved us.
Dave?
Yeah, the idea of being recognizing and being thankful for the Lord's provision in this life.
Yeah, the reminder that Christ took the blow for us, and to nip our grumbling by thinking on that.
In the case, the fact that we have a big God, but a big God who cares in every aspect of our lives.
But I think you had this personal illustration in there of like complaining but God being faithful, and I think that was just like really encouraging to think about my own life and the way that I so constantly complain, and yet like how faithful God is to us.
Yeah, I thought what was encouraging was this idea that God didn't just provide for us, but He provides really well for us. Like not better only than we deserve, but like pretty extravagantly. I was like, oh yeah, that's true. That's encouraging. What do you think you missed on?
I tried to tell one aspect of my point going through the text, and then coming back and going back through the text, and I noticed I was a little more reliant on my notes this time, so I kind of felt like my head was in my notes a lot more, instead of just maybe flowing a little bit, just starting at point A and going to B.
Okay.
I think I kind of messed that up a bit.
Yeah, the first point, I guess I had like a few sub-points, and I got kind of lost in there, and then when you were like, my second point is, I was like, oh, I thought we were already on point 3, let alone point 2.
I had that too, but I'll say something else here. It seems like this is a minor thing, but with your title and your argument, one small way to improve that would just be to hide the terminology or lingo.
Okay.
You just see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's not that you can't say it, but that's just one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, like the title and the argument felt kind of pretty similar to me.
Yeah.
Like they were the same.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe do something different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In part of the sermon, I felt lost because I didn't know where we were in the text.
Yeah. I think that was the problem of trying to go through and then come back and
Yeah, so if you're going to ever do that again, because it can be effective, we need to know you're doing that. You
Okay.
can just say, like, I've got 2 points. And in fact, I'm going to run through this story twice.
Okay.
Because I want to look at this story in 2 different ways.
Okay.
And then you launch into it. Then we're like, oh, okay.
Okay.
We're not confused when you're like, back to verse 2. We're like, whoa.
Right. Okay.
In your first point, pretty much like everything you said, you always ran an application to us, and it began to feel pretty
Too much.
repetitive. Well, it's just like and it just felt a little repetitive in terms of like, I'm gonna say a thing, I'm gonna say how it applies to us, I'm gonna say a thing, and so it's just like, it's not even that the applications were bad or like anything like that. It was just like, you're gonna say a thing, I know we're gonna get an application out of it,
Right.
and it began to like have this cadence to it that felt a little like rote and repetitive.
Okay.
Yeah, so I agree with that. Alright, so pendulum swung this week. So congratulations, you did not breach the context. However, it was like, bam, exposition, here we go. There's no lead up, there's no intro, we're just going for it. And so it was like, here's my title, here's my main point, here's my first point. Within like 4 sentences, you're like running down the road. And so I was like, I lost. I didn't know what your first point was.
Okay.
You really scribbled down your main point. So like, warm us up a little bit.
Okay.
Like, kudos. It wasn't like 10 minutes in the context, but setting the situation a little bit. Like I didn't even know that this came after the fact that they had just done the whole wilderness thing at the Red Sea, and the victory in the wilderness.
Okay.
It was just like, so they've been out there for 30 days. It's like, oh, okay, how'd they get out there? So, set it up. So, like, for example, that thing you said, don't eat up your seed, which is a really good point.
Yeah.
That would have been a really great way to start off. Like, most of you aren't farmers, but here's what you need to know. You don't eat up your seed. Let me explain what that means. Right? You go, why is that important? We're going to see some people in a pretty desperate situation. They would have been tempted to eat up their seed. Right?
Okay.
So then you're like setting us in that context of desperation. So we're ready for whatever comes up. But we're going to see God provides in the midst of, for all of our needs and circumstances, even in the midst of deprivation. Something like that, right?
Okay.
So then we're kind of set up for that thing, and it flows right into this.
You do intro and context at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. So all the pieces were there. They were just a little out of order.
Yeah.
I got a little lost with the Mary component.
Yep.
Because if I recall correctly, like at that point, your thing you were driving at is like how God sees and cares, and then like what you kind of gave us from the Mary thing was like do what you can, and so it was like, wait, does God care, or am I supposed to do what I can? And obviously those things aren't necessarily exclusive, but like that was just a little jolting for me.
Yeah. In fact, as I was doing it, I'm just thinking to myself, this doesn't make sense. What I'm saying.
Related to that, Andres, I wasn't totally clear as to how. Well, I wasn't real clear on the homiletical points, but how they were supporting your main point of God saves us from everything.
Okay.
I was having trouble, seeing how that can. I see it with the God providing for us as kind of saving us from these outward circumstances. I wasn't sure maybe how does he save us from the grumbling part exactly, because that was my sense of where you were going with it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Just be a little more clear on that.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that the explaining of the gospel wasn't too clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that, Navi?
Because he made a good transition. He explained good the fact of the rock, of the stuff, but then you start quoting different things and didn't point in one thing in that analogy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to speak to the gospel too, like, how is the fact that they're striking the rock, like, saving the people?
Right.
And then how does that relate to us, the fact that Christ is struck to save us? So it just felt like you assumed that, hey, once we strike this rock, like, we never got, like, God is taking the judgment that they needed, basically. That was like the missing, like the staff of judgment that should have come on them is going on God. Like that didn't.
Okay, didn't explain
those dots
that.
didn't get connected.
Clear enough.
It was
Okay.
the staff of judgment, and I knew God is getting struck with that staff of judgment. But I don't know why that matters for the people.
Right.
They get water out of it, which is like good, but I don't know why.
Right.
Which then made it confusing for like, what does that mean for me?
Right. There's no amplification.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it was also weird. Like, I felt like maybe we're reading a little bit of gospel back into the Old Testament, like. That was Christ there, and it's like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's just a little like off-putting.
Okay.
Are you referring to like the Holy Spirit thing?
Well, it was just like that, like Christ was struck for the Israelites. And it's like, I'm not like, you haven't convinced me of
Yeah,
that. And it's a pretty like controversial thing to say.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you're not going to take the time to convince me of it,
Right.
And so now I'm just thinking about that when you're trying to hit me with the gospel,
Okay.
So it's like, if you're going to say like, hey, that was Christ there and he was getting struck for them, it just needs to happen in a different way that doesn't distract.
Yeah. So this gets back. Just watch some of your applications. Think backwards on some of your applications, and think about possible misinterpretations. So, you were talking about how like you had this great point about God providing like really good things for the people, right? And like he could have given them hardtack, but he gives them like honey tasting bread and meat. And brothers, you need to provide good sermons to your people, which is totally a true point. But you just made us all God.
Okay.
So
Sermons are hard. Amen. He jumped.
just think about something where you're like, oh well. Yeah, it's probably. I agree with what you said. It's probably just not the place to put it.
Okay.
Because you're making like quails into sermons and us into God. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think? You made some progress on. So you tried. You're like, I tried this thing, and I think I at least.
Oh, I did have an application here where I was going to lower the shield and then stab the throat, and I missed it.
Oh, that's
I was trying. I missed.
What was it gonna be?
It was with that hardtack thing, and I just messed it up. I messed it up. But,
All right.
no, I just think preaching and then telling a story at the same time is just proving to be a little bit more challenging for me. And just trying to find how I can do that is what I'm trying to do right
Okay.
now.
All right.
So, because I don't want to be, going verse by verse and boring and.
Amen. All right.
I think last sermon, if I recall correctly, there was you dropped like illustrations and your personal stories, and you brought them back, and they were the best part of the sermon. Like that audit thing was so freaking good, like, and it worked so well, and it was so you. So obviously you're not preaching yourself, but like more of your experience, reflections, and wisdom on life and this faith journey that we're on.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andre, one word of commendation I wrote down here is, I don't know if you do it consciously or not, but you have some really creative ways of giving application. And I'm not talking about the quails becoming sermons.
Really creative.
But I mean, like, at one point you voiced potential complaints or grumblings, like you said. Why, God, why did you put me in this Bible study or in this church? Anyway, that was just a thought-provoking way to, like, voice a potential complaint that we would have. Another way you did that, I know you got maybe a little sidetracked with the Mary thing, but even saying, like, think about the Marys in your church. Just that way of, you have different ways of making application that is engaging.
Yeah.
And then the third example of that was your own personal story of grumbling, which is another different way of doing application.
Yeah.
That was drew us in.
I really enjoyed that personal illustration that you gave to us when you grumbled, complain, because you was talking about you, but I can identify with you, and I can I remind the occasions that I have complained to God, and also remind how the Lord respond to me with many things, gracious things.
Brother, I know some other people didn't like it, but I actually loved the organization of your sermon. I maybe you didn't execute it perfectly. I mean, you didn't execute it perfectly. But I think actually, like, the biggest lowering shield stabbing in the throat was that, because, like, your first point is like, man, God's so good, and I'm just like, yeah, God is good, like, I love God. And then your second point, you're like, no, you don't, you like grumble against him all the time. And I'm like, oh shoot, like, I'm messed up, like, here's God providing and I'm just straight grumbling against him. And then you end with the gospel. So I feel like that thought, at least, that was money. So I would run with that.
Yep. Speaking about contradicting people, I am fully with Christian in that you drop too many applications. But The ones you did early on in particular. So the one I liked the best was preach a big God who also cares about daily stuff.
Yes.
I was like, okay, because it didn't take us out of the text. Some of the other ones, like the Mary thing, like took us out of the text. But that one, you're right there with the provision thing. He's a big God.
Yeah.
And like preaches big God, but he's actually caring about daily things because you're right back to, well, what daily things? You're back to food, water, the necessities of life. So it kept us right there. But was a point particular to us, it was kind of just like preach this kind of God. Because it is so easy to preach from this, like, oh, God's sovereignty or power or whatever. It's like, yeah, but it's like providing food and water. So, come on. It was good.
Yeah, and with all your applications, I thought you did a really good job of just like keeping your audience in mind. Like they were all clearly directed straight towards the people in this room.
When you were getting to the gospel connection, you somehow set it up really well. And part of it was when you started talking about God being on trial.
Yes, that's such a good image.
And that was really, you were building that well. I don't know exactly how you were doing that, but that was good.
Yes, I like your main point and how you use your main point, because you use in different ways, in different parts of the sermon, that God save us for everything, and then when you say that God save us from ourselves too, that was a nice move.
There are like a couple of things that you did where they're just like really nice reversals. So like one of them was on trial, where it's like the people are putting God on trial. And God's like, okay, and it's like, we're just not expecting that, like, oh man, that's terrible. But then God does like stand trial, quote unquote, which is like, oh, that's just a cool little reversal there. Or like your transition to your second point, like, man, it would be great to end the sermon here, And it's like, that's a good sermon. You're like, but we can't. And it's just like, that was just such a good transition. I appreciated those things. Very clean.
So you used your own personal expertise well. So we already talked about like the don't eat your seed thing at the beginning, but then also like the difficulty of providing meat. Like nobody's going to get that who hears this sermon who's never been hunting. And so it felt like approachable. Like I didn't have to be a farmer or a hunter to understand what you were saying. So you made the thing approachable, but you were just kind of saying like, this is how ridiculous this is. So the point like highlighted how crazy the situation was, which is why it was so effective, and then led us straight into like, okay, so now I understand like how gracious this God is, which is helpful.
Okay.